Well, welcome to the panel on the rise of modern science. Our panelists will introduce themselves going from left to right. And we have actually discussed among ourselves sort of where we're going to start, but we have no idea where we're going to end. And if there are questions, I think I can say this, if you have questions about anything we're saying, like, wait a minute, I didn't get that, or what are you talking about, feel free to sort of like raise your hand and pretend that you have to go to the bathroom. And we will
let you go to the bathroom.
Let you go to the bathroom. So.
My name is John Farrell. My day job is producing video for Houghton Mifflin. But I've written a couple of books. The most recent is called The Day Without Yesterday. It was kind of a science bio of George Lemaitre, who developed the Big Bang Theory, or before it was called the Big Bang Theory, back in the early 1930s. And I've also written a few articles for Salon, Cosmos, and Skeptic.
I'm Brother Guy Consolmagno. I'm a Jesuit brother and an astronomer at the Vatican Observatory. My most notable accomplishment when I lived in Boston and was going to MIT was being Skinner of the Mitzvahs for half a semester. And I do have a book that I can show off, which fortunately he brought a copy of, because I forgot to do that. It's called God's Mechanics, How Scientists and Engineers Make Sense of Religion. And there's actually going to be a reading for that tomorrow. But because I was assigned to the Vatican Observatory, people always ask me the same questions that we're going to be answering. And so I'm here to find out what some good, snappy answers to those questions might be.
Okay. My name's Mike Flynn. I have not written so impressive books as these, but I did write a book set in the Middle Ages, which forced me to do some research, including, as it turned out, research on the origins of science. Some of you may have heard of it, obviously not enough of you, or it would have won. Okay, but
it was nominated.
It's an honor just to be
yes.
nominated.
So, the question that we were going to start with is, what do we mean by science when we're talking about the rise of science? Why is what we're going to be talking about in the Middle Ages something that we claim, and if you stand up, Jordan, so that people can see. Stand back, I'm going to try science. What is science? What is it really, as opposed to what people think it is? And where did it come from? Where did the very idea that we could do science come from? Well, since you've got the answer, you'll start, and then we'll tell you why you're wrong.
According to this book, there are at least 8 different definitions, which I'm not going to read all 8 of them.
Oh.
But one definition is that science is whatever it is people in white lab coats do.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that I've talked to think that, like the invention of television, that was science. Well, no, it's not.
It's technology.
It's technology. Well, it's the same thing, isn't it? Well, no, not exactly. Other people have say that science is essentially the accumulation of facts about the natural world. Yeah, kind of, but that's not enough to mean science, at least in the sense that we're talking about.
That video machine can collect facts, but it doesn't do science.
Yeah. I like that. That's pretty good. And people can do that too. They can record observations. They can make notes. They can even discover that that there's a class of chemicals called acids, but they're not yet doing science. So there's something more that's required.
I'm reminded of what I learned about history, the difference between chronicles and history. And Herodotus was considered the first historian because rather than just listing all the events that happened that year, he was the first person to select events and try to put them into a context and explain why they happened that way.
And there's the critical distinction. Science, at least in the sense that we talk about it today, is putting the facts into a context, a set of theories that explain why these facts happen the way they did.
I agree. And what I find fascinating is whether what the Greeks did before the Middle Ages was science in these terms, or getting close to science, as opposed to what began in the Middle Ages. Normally, I think we've all read enough kind of general history books to kind of see this as gaping hole in the timeline. Ancient Greeks started science, then the Renaissance, and there's this big black hole for about 1,000 years in between.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate because it's not really what happened.
Exactly.
Well, there was sort of a black hole, but it was called the Roman Empire.
Yeah, well,
So the Roman, unlike the Romans, had no interest whatsoever in trying to explain why anything happened. Just, make sacrifice to Vulcan or something, for crying out loud, and then get on with things.
There are a couple of points, both modern and Roman, to think of. The modern one is this confusion that we have today between science and technology can in some part be traced back to a local hero, Vannevar Bush, who was put in charge of the war effort during World War II to develop cool things like atomic bombs and jet airplanes. And he was running into trouble getting money and getting respect from the military because he said engineers need this, and engineers are those people who get their hands dirty. So he made it his policy. He describes this in his book. I'm blanking on the name, his memoir. He describes Pieces of the Action. Wonderful book. He describes how he made the decision that every engineer working for the government in the war effort was to be called a scientist. And that way they would get the respect and the mojo and the resources to do the work they had to do. So from that point, it was almost institutionalized that science and technology would be confused for one another.
And the odd thing is, there was no word scientist in the English language until about the 1830s, when it was coined quite deliberately in parallel to the word artist, because if the arts had artists, then the sciences should have scientists. And I'm blanking right now on the name of the guy who did that.
Was it fair?
No, it was an American scientist.
Right.
And it always struck me as very odd that the idea of science as a profession arose at the same time as American fundamentalism. The Second Great Awakening.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, it's no surprise. They're both based on the idea of literal interpretation.
With a certain idea of literalism. The other part, to go back to the Roman, is, of course, when we think of the Middle Ages, we think of this ultra-religious era. And there's a reason why science developed out of that, because science depends on your religion. There's three fundamental assumptions that you have to have before you can be a scientist. First of all, you have to assume that the universe actually exists.
Prove it.
And you can't. Maybe I'm just a butterfly dreaming that I'm at a science fiction convention, and I can't prove otherwise. There's a wonderful story that, solipsism is the idea that the universe is just a projection of my own imagination. And George Bernard Shaw tells the story of a woman who came up and said, yes, well, I am a solipsist. So are most of my friends. Think about it.
Solipsists unite.
Yes.